The year was 1893, and in Willow Creek, Kentucky, time seemed to move at the pace of molasses in January. Gentle and green, the hills rolled as far as the eye could see, punctuated by farmhouses and the occasional church steeple piercing the sky. On these hills stood the Blackwood estate, a Victorian home once grand but now weathered by decades of harsh winters and scorching summers. For 3 generations, the Blackwood family had lived in these hills. It began with old Samuel Blackwood, who struck it lucky during the coal boom. Then came his son Elijah, who through shrewd investments in the railroad, doubled the family fortune. Now, the estate belonged to Thomas Blackwood, a man whose reputation for peculiarity had spread throughout the county like wildfire. Thomas wasn't always considered strange. There was a time when he was the most eligible bachelor in Willow Creek, with his considerable inheritance and handsome features. In 1874, he married Eleanora Pierce, the belle of Louisville society. And for a while, the Blackwood estate became known for its lavish parties and gatherings. But almost 20 years ago, all of that changed when Eleanora gave birth to their only child, a daughter they named Abigail. The night Abigail was born, a terrible storm raged across Kentucky. Lightning split the sky, and thunder shook the very foundations of the Blackwood home. The midwife, in all her 60 years, later claimed she'd never seen such a violent tempest. After 18 hours of labor, when Eleanora finally delivered the child, the room fell silent. The baby didn't cry. The midwife feared the worst, but then little Abigail opened her eyes so pale blue they appeared almost silver in certain light, and simply stared at her mother. That same night, as the storm continued to batter the house, something strange occurred. Simultaneously, every mirror in the Blackwood home shattered. Not a single one remained intact. Some said it was merely the storm, the vibrations from the thunder, perhaps. Others whispered of darker things, of omens and portents. Whatever the cause, Thomas Blackwood immediately ordered all the broken mirrors removed from the house. And he didn't stop there. From town, he sent for carpenters to board up every reflective surface in the home. Silver platters were locked away in the cellar. With heavy drapes that remained drawn day and night, the windows were covered. Even the ornate clock in the foyer, with its polished brass pendulum, was disassembled and stored away. From that day forward, no new mirrors were permitted in the Blackwood estate. Eleanora complied with her husband's wishes, though many said the light went out of her eyes after that night. She became a shadow of her former self, moving through the house like a ghost, speaking little and smiling less. As for Thomas, he threw himself into his work managing the family's coal interests, often leaving for weeks at a time on business. And in a house without reflections, little Abigail grew up in darkness. Now, in the summer of 1893, Abigail Blackwood was about to turn 19, a young woman who had never truly seen her own face. Through the gap in Abigail's bedroom curtains, the first rays of morning sunlight filtered, casting a thin golden line across her sleeping form. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing that peculiar silver blue that had unnerved so many over the years. Slowly, she sat up, running her fingers through her long auburn hair, a color she knew only because her father had once mentioned it in passing. Never varied, Abigail's routine. She would dress in the clothes her mother laid out for her, using only her sense of touch to ensure everything was properly fastened. She would then descend to the dining room for breakfast with her mother, who would help adjust anything Abigail had missed in her appearance. When home, her father rarely joined them, preferring to take his meals in his study. But this morning was different. As Abigail made her way down the grand staircase, she noticed an unusual commotion in the foyer. A man's voice, not her father's, echoed through the hall, along with the sound of heavy objects being moved. "Miss Blackwood," called Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, as Abigail reached the bottom step. "For now, you should return to your room. Your mother is seeing to some business matters." Abigail had long since learned that questioning the strange customs of the Blackwood household led nowhere. But today, something stirred within her, a curiosity that wouldn't be silenced. "What's happening, Mrs. Winters?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. With concern, the housekeeper's weathered face creased. Just some new furniture arriving, miss. Nothing to trouble yourself about. But past the older woman's shoulder, Abigail could see where two men were carefully maneuvering what appeared to be a large wooden crate through the front door. The stamp on the crate's side read, Harrington and Sons Fine Furnishings, Louisville. My father ordered new furniture. Abigail pressed, knowing how unusual this would be. Thomas Blackwood detested change of any kind. Uncomfortably, Mrs. Winters shifted. It's for the East Parlor, Mississippi. Your mother's been wanting to refresh it for some time. This was a lie, and they both knew it. For years, Eleanora Blackwood hadn't shown interest in household matters. I see, Abigail replied, though she didn't. Then I shall take breakfast in the garden this morning. The weather is fine. Mrs. Winters seemed relieved by this suggestion. Very good, Mississippi. I'll have Bessie bring it out directly. Abigail moved toward the back of the house, but as soon as Mrs. Winters turned her attention back to the delivery men, she doubled back, slipping into the shadows of the grand hall. From there, she watched as the men struggled with their burden, finally setting it down in the center of the foyer. To her surprise, her mother appeared then, looking more animated than Abigail had seen her in years. Still a handsome woman was Eleanora Blackwood, though pale and thin from years spent largely indoors. Her dark hair, once the envy of Louisville society, was now streaked with gray. But she carried herself with the dignity of her upbringing. You must be very careful with it, Eleanora instructed the men. It's quite valuable. Yes, ma'am, replied the older of the two, tipping his cap respectfully. We'll have it set up in no time. Fascinated, Abigail watched as they began to pry open the crate with crowbars. Plank by plank, the wooden exterior fell away, revealing something swathed in thick layers of burlap and cotton batting. Whatever it was, it stood taller than either of the delivery men. Anxiously, Eleanora hovered as they unwrapped the mysterious object. From her hiding place, Abigail leaned forward, trying to get a better view, and accidentally bumped against an umbrella stand. The metal stand wobbled but didn't fall, though the noise was enough to catch her mother's attention. Eleanora's head snapped toward the sound, her eyes widening when she spotted her daughter. Abigail, what are you doing here? Go to your room at once. The vehemence in her mother's voice startled Abigail. Typically distant, Eleanora was rarely harsh. I'm sorry, Mother. I was just curious about, go now, Eleanora's voice cracked like a whip. The delivery men paused in their work, exchanging uncomfortable glances. Humiliated at being treated like a child in front of strangers, Abigail felt heat rise to her cheeks. As you wish, she replied coldly, turning on her heel. As she did, the last of the wrappings fell away from the mysterious object, and from the corner of her eye, Abigail caught a glimpse of gilded wood and something reflective. A mirror. A massive, ornate mirror in a gold leaf frame. The shock of it stopped her in her tracks. A mirror in the Blackwood house. It was inconceivable. Abigail, please. Her mother's voice had softened, turned pleading. Your father will be home tomorrow. You know how he feels about these things. And suddenly Abigail understood. This was an act of rebellion by her mother. Small but significant. Against Thomas Blackwood's strict prohibition, Eleanora was placing a mirror in the house. But why now? After all these years. I won't say anything, Abigail found herself promising, though she wasn't sure why she should keep her mother's secret. But I want to know why, Mother. Why now? Eleanora glanced nervously at the delivery men, who were pretending not to listen. We'll discuss it later. Please go to your room. Reluctantly, Abigail complied, her mind racing with questions. As she climbed the stairs, she heard her mother instructing the men to place the mirror in the east parlor, a room that had gone largely unused for years. Back in her bedroom, Abigail paced restlessly. All her life, she had accepted the peculiar rules of the Blackwood household without question. No mirrors, no reflective surfaces. Even water basins in bedrooms were made of dull ceramic that showed no reflection. She had grown accustomed to knowing her appearance only through touch and the occasional comment from others. But now a mirror had entered the house, her mother's mirror, and Abigail found herself consumed with a desire she had never acknowledged before. The desire to see herself, truly see herself, for the very first time. Like wounded animals, the hours crawled by. Abigail declined lunch, claiming a headache. By mid-afternoon, the delivery men had gone, and the house had settled back into its usual silence. She listened carefully at her door, hearing Mrs. Winters instructing the maids about dinner preparations downstairs. The east parlor would be empty. Heart pounding, Abigail slipped out of her room and down the hall. At the far end of the house was the east parlor, a room that caught the afternoon light beautifully, or so she had been told. The door was closed, but not locked. Taking a deep breath, Abigail turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was dim, its windows covered with the same heavy drapes that shrouded the rest of the house, but enough light filtered through to illuminate the object that now dominated the space, the mirror. It stood at least 7 feet tall, its frame intricately carved with twining vines and flowers, all covered in gold leaf that seemed to glow even in the muted light. And the mirror itself, the glass, was clear and perfect, without a single flaw that Abigail could see. With perfect clarity, it reflected the dim room. Slowly, Abigail approached, her heart hammering in her chest. For 19 years, she had lived without knowing her own face. She had felt the contours of it with her fingertips. She had tried to picture how she might look based on her mother's appearance and the few comments others had made over the years. Mrs. Winters once said she had her father's eyes. The butcher's wife had mentioned her lovely complexion. Small details that she had collected and treasured, trying to construct an image of herself from fragments. Now the truth stood before her, waiting. 3 steps away from the mirror, Abigail closed her eyes. 2 steps. 1. She stood directly before it now, eyes still shut tight. The moment stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes. A stranger was the woman in the mirror, tall and slender, with auburn hair that fell in waves past her shoulders. The pale blue eyes that had been described as unsettling were indeed unusual, not quite silver, not quite blue, but something in between, like the sky just before dawn. Her features were delicate, high cheekbones, a straight nose, full lips currently parted in surprise. With a shock, Abigail realized she was beautiful, not in the conventional way of the girls in town, but in a striking, almost otherworldly manner. She raised a hand to her cheek, watching in fascination as her reflection did the same. She smiled, and the woman in the mirror smiled back, revealing a small dimple in her right cheek that Abigail had never known existed. For several minutes, she simply stood there, becoming acquainted with herself. The experience was dizzying, exhilarating. This was her. This was Abigail Blackwood. No longer just a collection of sensations and second-hand descriptions, but a whole person, visible and real. She was so entranced that at first she didn't notice it, the slight discrepancy, the tiny delay. Abigail tilted her head to the right, studying her profile. Her reflection followed a fraction of a second too late. She blinked. The woman in the mirror blinked just after. "No," Abigail whispered, taking a step back. "It's just my imagination." To test her theory, she raised her right hand quickly. The reflection raised its right hand, but not quite in unison. There was a delay, barely perceptible, but undeniably there. Cold fear washed over Abigail. She took another step back, and the reflection did the same, again, just slightly out of time. And then something happened that sent ice through her veins. Abigail stood perfectly still, her arms at her sides. But in the mirror, her reflection smiled, a slow, knowing smile that Abigail herself was not making. And then, ever so slightly, the reflection raised one finger to its lips in a shushing gesture. A scream built in Abigail's throat, but before it could escape, the parlor door flew open. Eleanora Blackwood stood in the doorway, her face a mask of fury and fear. "What have you done?" she gasped, rushing forward to grab Abigail's arm and pull her away from the mirror. "You must never look into it. Never." "Mother, it moved. My reflection moved on its own," Abigail cried, struggling to free herself from Eleanora's surprisingly strong grip. "Nonsense," Eleanora snapped, though her eyes darted fearfully to the mirror. "It's just your imagination. This is why your father forbade mirrors. They play tricks on the mind." "No, Mother. I saw it. It smiled at me when I wasn't smiling." "Enough." Eleanora's voice rose to a shout, something Abigail had never heard before. "Go to your room and stay there until dinner. I should never have brought this thing into the house." "But why did you?" Abigail demanded, standing her ground despite her mother's evident distress. "After all these years, why now?" Eleanora seemed to deflate suddenly, the anger draining from her, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. "Because your father has kept us in darkness long enough," she said quietly. "Because you deserve to know yourself, Abigail. To see yourself as others see you." "But if mirrors are dangerous?" "They're not dangerous," Eleanora interrupted. "They're just mirrors. Reflective glass, nothing more. Your father's fears are, their superstition, Abigail. I've indulged him for too long." Abigail glanced back at the mirror, which now showed only her and her mother standing in the dim room. No strange movements, no unsettling smiles. Had she imagined it? "I know what I saw," she insisted. Eleanora sighed heavily. "What you saw was the product of 19 years of isolation and mystery. Your mind played a trick on you, that's all." She squeezed Abigail's arm gently. "Now, please go to your room. Your father returns tomorrow, and I need to think about what to do with this." Abigail allowed herself to be led from the room. But as they reached the door, she looked back one last time. In the mirror, her reflection stared back, and winked, though Abigail's own eyes remained wide open. She gasped, but Eleanora had already closed the parlor door, shutting away the impossible sight. "You're overwrought," her mother said, misinterpreting Abigail's reaction. "Rest before dinner. Everything will seem clearer then." But as Abigail climbed the stairs to her bedroom, nothing felt clear at all. She knew what she had seen, and it defied explanation. Her reflection had moved independently of her. It had acknowledged her with gestures she herself had not made. And the most terrifying thought of all, what if her father's seemingly irrational fear of mirrors had been justified all along? Dinner that evening was a tense affair. Eleanora picked at her food, her mind clearly elsewhere. Abigail couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen in the mirror, replaying the moment over and over. The smile, the finger to the lips, the wink. Each recollection sent a fresh chill down her spine. "Mother," she finally said, breaking the lengthy silence. "You must tell me the truth. Why did Father ban mirrors from our home? What happened the night I was born?" Eleanora set down her fork with a clatter. "Nothing happened, Abigail. Your father, he has always been a superstitious man. The storm that night, combined with the strain of your difficult birth, it affected him deeply. When the mirrors broke. All of them at once." Abigail interrupted. Eleanora hesitated. "It was a violent storm. The house shook with thunder." "That doesn't explain why they all shattered simultaneously," Abigail pressed. "Or why Father has maintained this bizarre rule for 19 years. You don't understand," Eleanora said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your father believes. He believes that mirrors are doorways, that they can let things in, or out." "What things?" Eleanora shook her head. "It doesn't matter. They're just superstitions. Old folktales from the hills. His grandmother filled his head with such nonsense when he was a boy. But you never questioned it. You lived all these years without a mirror, without seeing yourself. A bitter smile crossed Eleanora's lips. I knew what I looked like before I came to this house, Abigail. And vanity seems a small price to pay for peace. Peace? Abigail echoed. Is that what we have in this house? This prison of shadows and secrets? You don't know what you're talking about, Eleanora said sharply, rising from her chair. Your father has protected this family. Protected you? From what? From seeing myself? Abigail stood as well, anger suddenly surging through her. Or is there something about me he doesn't want me to see? Eleanora's face paled. What do you mean? I mean, Abigail said, stepping closer to her mother. What if there's something wrong with me? Something that shows in my reflection. Is that why he's kept me in ignorance all these years? No, Abigail. No. Eleanora reached for her daughter's hands. There is nothing wrong with you. You're perfect. Beautiful. Then why? Because your father is afraid, Eleanora burst out. Not of you, never of you, but of what happened that night. Abigail felt her anger giving way to curiosity. Tell me, she urged gently. Please, mother, I need to know. Eleanora sank back into her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 45 years. The night you were born, she began slowly. The storm wasn't the only strange thing, the midwife, she said when you first opened your eyes, you didn't look at me or at her. You looked past us both, at the mirror on the wall. And you smiled. I was a newborn, Abigail said, confused. Newborns don't smile. No, they don't, Eleanora agreed. That's what frightened her. And then, when the mirrors shattered, your father became convinced that something had tried to come through. Something drawn to you. That's absurd, Abigail said, though her voice lacked conviction as she remembered the unsettling behavior of her reflection that afternoon. Of course it is, Eleanora said quickly. It was just a coincidence, the storm and your birth and the mirrors breaking. But Thomas, he's always believed in the old stories. About twins of the soul that live on the other side of mirrors, waiting for a chance to cross over. Twins of the soul. Abigail repeated. It's nonsense, Eleanora insisted. Just hill country superstition. Every person has a reflection, and sometimes the mind plays tricks. Makes you think the reflection moves differently, but it's just your eyes deceiving you. Abigail thought of the wink, the smile, the finger to the lips. Those hadn't been tricks of the eye. The mirror in the east parlor, she said slowly. Where did it come from? Eleanora looked away. It was my mother's. I had it in storage in Louisville all these years. When she passed last month, I decided it was time to bring it here. To end this foolishness. Does father know? No, and he won't, because the mirror will be gone before he returns tomorrow. Eleanora's voice was firm. I was wrong to bring it here. I see that now. Because you believe I imagined what I saw, Abigail challenged. Because whether it was real or imagined doesn't matter, Eleanora replied. The effect is the same. It's disturbed the peace of this house. Peace? Abigail scoffed. Is that what you call this half-life we've been living? This isn't peace, mother. It's surrender. Eleanora flinched as if struck. You don't understand what your father has sacrificed for this family. Then help me understand, Abigail pleaded. Let me see the mirror again. Let me prove to you that what I saw was real. Absolutely not, Eleanora said, rising once more. The mirror will be removed first thing tomorrow. This discussion is over. She left the dining room without another word, leaving Abigail alone with her thoughts, and her anger, and her determination. That night, as the house slept, Abigail made her decision. She would see the mirror again. She would confront whatever waited for her there, and she would finally uncover the truth that had been hidden from her all her life. The grandfather clock in the hall struck midnight as Abigail slipped from her bedroom. The house was dark, but she knew its layout intimately, navigating the corridors by touch and memory. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she made her way toward the east parlor, but the sound seemed swallowed by the oppressive silence of the sleeping house. The door to the east parlor stood ajar, a thin sliver of moonlight spilling from within. Abigail paused, surprised. Had her mother left it open, or had someone else visited the mirror after the household retired? Steeling herself, she pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The room was bathed in silver moonlight, the heavy drapes having been drawn back from the windows. And there, in the center of the room, stood the mirror, its gold frame gleaming like a portal to another world. Cautiously, Abigail approached, half expecting to see her reflection move independently again. But the mirror showed only the room behind her, rendered in shades of gray and black by the moonlight. Her reflection mirrored her movements perfectly as she drew closer. "I know you're there," she whispered, feeling both foolish and terrified. "I saw you today." Nothing happened. The reflection remained just that, a reflection. Frustrated, Abigail moved closer until her face was just inches from the glass. She studied her features in the dim light, the unusual eyes, the curve of her cheekbones, the small dimple that appeared when she attempted a smile. "Show yourself," she demanded. "Whatever you are, whatever you want." Still nothing. Just her own face staring back at her, looking lost and a little afraid. Abigail sighed, beginning to doubt herself. Had she imagined the whole thing? Was her mother right? Had her mind simply played tricks on her, unaccustomed as she was to seeing her own reflection? She turned away from the mirror, ready to return to her room and forget this foolishness. But as she did, something in the glass caught her eye, a movement. She spun back, heart racing. Her reflection stood as before, but now there was something different about it. The eyes, they seemed darker somehow. The unusual silver blue deepened to a stormy gray, and the expression, not frightened or confused, as Abigail felt, but calm, knowing. As Abigail watched, frozen in place, her reflection's lips curved into a smile she herself was not making. "Hello, sister," the reflection said, its lips moving while Abigail's remained still. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Not loud, but clear, with a strange echoing quality. It sounded like Abigail's own voice, but with an unfamiliar cadence, as if spoken by someone who had learned English from books rather than conversation. What are you?" Abigail gasped, stumbling back a step. The reflection didn't move with her. It remained in place, hands clasped demurely before it, still smiling that unsettling smile. "I am you," it replied. "And I am not you. I am the you that might have been. The you that waits on the other side." "The other side of what?" Abigail's voice was barely audible, even to herself. "The glass, of course." The reflection tilted its head, studying Abigail with unnerving intensity. "The barrier between your world and mine. So thin, yet so absolute. Until now." "This isn't possible," Abigail whispered. "You're a hallucination. A trick of the light." The reflection laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Is that what your father told you? That mirrors lie? That reflections are just light and shadow?" It shook its head. Poor Abigail. Kept in the dark, literally and figuratively, all these years. "My father was protecting me," Abigail said, though she wasn't sure why she felt compelled to defend Thomas Blackwood's strange prohibition. "From me," the reflection's smile widened. "But I'm a part of you, Abigail. The part that was separated at birth. Don't you remember?" "Remember what?" "The moment of division. When you chose that world, and I was cast into this one." The reflection pressed a hand against its side of the glass. "We were meant to be one, you and I. But something went wrong. The storm, perhaps. Or maybe it was always meant to be this way. Abigail felt a strange pull toward the mirror, toward the creature that wore her face. What do you want from me? What everyone wants, the reflection replied simply. A chance to live. To experience your world as you have. To feel the sun on my skin, to taste food, to touch and be touched. Its eyes gleamed in the moonlight. To be real. You can't have my life, Abigail said, finding strength in the absurdity of the situation. Whatever you are, you belong on that side of the glass. Do I? The reflection's voice hardened. Who decided that, I wonder? Your father. The man who locked away every mirror rather than face the truth. That his daughter is only half of what she should be. You're lying, Abigail insisted, though doubt nagged at her. This is some kind of trick. Ask your mother, then, the reflection suggested. Ask her about the night you were born. Ask her what the midwife really saw in that mirror before it shattered. Ask her why she brought this mirror into the house now, after all these years. She wanted me to see myself, Abigail said. To know what I look like. The reflection laughed again, that brittle, cutting sound. Is that what she told you? Oh, Abigail. She brought the mirror because she knows you're incomplete without me. Because she's watched you sleepwalk through life for 19 years, missing the essential part of yourself that was trapped here, on this side. No. Abigail shook her head vehemently. You're trying to confuse me. To trick me. I'm trying to complete you, the reflection corrected. As you would complete me. Two halves of a whole, separated by glass and fear. And how exactly would this completion occur? Abigail asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice despite her fear. The reflection's smile turned secretive. Simple. You let me through. Through the mirror. How? Blood calls to blood, the reflection said cryptically. The barrier can be broken with sacrifice. A chill ran down Abigail's spine. What kind of sacrifice? Nothing you'd miss, the reflection assured her. Just a drop of blood on the glass. That's all it would take to open the way. And then what happens? Abigail demanded. You step through and take my place. Live my life while I'm trapped in there. The reflection shook its head. No, Abigail. We would merge. Become one being, as we were always meant to be. Neither you nor I, but something new. Something complete. Despite herself, Abigail felt a tug of longing. Hadn't she always felt that something was missing? That some essential part of herself remained elusive? What if this strange creature was telling the truth? What if completion awaited just on the other side of that silvered glass? She took a step toward the mirror, then another. That's it, the reflection encouraged. You feel it, don't you? The pull, the recognition. We belong together, Abigail. Abigail stood before the mirror now, close enough to touch it. The reflection raised its hand again, pressing it against the glass. Slowly, Abigail raised her own hand to match the gesture. Their palms separated only by the thickness of the mirror. And then she noticed something, a subtle difference she had overlooked before. The reflection's hand had 6 fingers. A small, extra digit extended from the side of its hand, thin and pale as a winter twig. Abigail jerked her hand back as if burned. You're not me, she whispered. You're something else entirely. The reflection's smile faltered for the first time. A small discrepancy, it said dismissively. Nothing that matters. Our souls are the same, even if our forms differ slightly. No, Abigail said, backing away. My father was right to keep mirrors from this house. You're trying to trick me. To steal my life. I'm trying to claim what should have been mine from the beginning, the reflection hissed, its beautiful face contorting with sudden rage. Half a life, Abigail. That's all either of us has had. Half a life because your father was too afraid to let us become whole. I don't believe you, Abigail said, continuing to back away. Whatever you are, you mean me harm. I can take what I want, the reflection threatened, its voice dropping to a growl. All I need is a willing invitation. But if you refuse me that, there are other ways. Slower. Less pleasant for everyone in this house. You can't hurt us, Abigail said, though she wasn't certain this was true. You're trapped on that side of the glass. For now, the reflection agreed. But your mother brought this mirror into the house for a reason, Abigail. A reason she hasn't shared with you. And when your father returns tomorrow. It smiled. Well, things will become very interesting indeed. A sudden noise from the hallway, footsteps approaching rapidly. The reflection's eyes widened. We're not finished, sister, it whispered urgently. This is just the beginning. And then, as the door to the parlor flew open, the reflection seemed to snap back into synchronization with Abigail, mirroring her startled expression perfectly. Eleonora stood in the doorway, a lamp held high, her face a mask of terror. Abigail, get away from there. Mother, it spoke to me, Abigail cried, pointing at the mirror. The reflection, it's alive. Eleonora set the lamp down on a side table and rushed forward, grabbing Abigail's arm and pulling her away from the mirror. What did it say to you? She demanded, her voice tight with fear. Tell me exactly. Abigail stared at her mother in shock. You believe me? You know about it? What did it say? Eleonora repeated, gripping Abigail's shoulder so tightly it hurt. It said we were meant to be one person. That we were separated at birth somehow. That you brought the mirror here to reunite us. Abigail searched her mother's face. Is it true? Do you know what that thing is? Eleonora released Abigail and turned away, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. I never should have brought it here, she whispered. I thought after all these years it might be different, that it might be gone or weakened. That you might be strong enough now to resist it. Mother, what is it? What's in the mirror? Eleonora turned back, tears streaming down her face. We don't have a name for them. The hill people call them fetchlights or hollowwalkers. Your father's grandmother told stories of them. Beings that form in reflections, taking the shape of a person but lacking a soul of their own. It had 6 fingers, Abigail said quietly. On its right hand. Eleonora nodded. They're never perfect copies. There's always something wrong, something that gives them away. Your father noticed it the night you were born. When you looked in the midwife's mirror, your reflection had 6 fingers. And then all the mirrors in the house shattered at once. The reflection said it wants to become one with me. That blood on the glass would let it through. Never, Eleonora gasped. Abigail, promise me you'll never give it what it asks for. These things, they don't merge with their human counterparts. They replace them, consume them. The person vanishes, and the fetchlight takes their place, wearing their face, living their life. But something vital is always missing. A hollow imitation of a human being. But why did you bring the mirror here now? Abigail asked. If you knew the danger. Eleonora sank into a nearby chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Because your father is dying, Abigail. The words hit Abigail like a physical blow. What? No, he can't be. He's only 49. He's consumption, Eleonora said flatly. The doctor in Louisville confirmed it last month. He has months at most. And when he's gone. I feared what might happen to us. To you. I don't understand, Abigail said, kneeling beside her mother. What does father's illness have to do with the mirror? Your father has been protecting us all these years, Eleonora explained, her voice low. Not just by keeping mirrors away, but through other means. Old protections. Rituals from the hills. Things I never believed in until that night 19 years ago. Rituals. Like witchcraft. Abigail had heard whispers about mountain folk and their strange ways, but had never associated such things with her proper, business-minded father. Your father comes from older stock than he lets on, Eleonora said with a wan smile. His grandmother was known throughout these hills as a cunning woman. She taught him things. Ways to ward off evil, to bind spirits to their proper realms. He's maintained those protections all these years, but when he's gone. She trailed off, the implication clear. You thought the mirror might help somehow? Abigail guessed. That confronting this thing might free me from it. Eleonora nodded. It was foolish. Desperate. But I couldn't bear the thought of leaving you unprotected after we're both gone. I thought if you could face it, recognize it for what it is, perhaps its power over you would be broken. It didn't work, Abigail said. If anything, seeing it has made it stronger. It threatened us, Mother. It said there were other ways it could get what it wants. Eleonora's face paled further. We must cover the mirror immediately. And tomorrow, before your father returns, we'll have it removed. Destroyed if possible. Together, they found heavy blankets in a linen chest and draped them over the mirror, being careful not to look at its surface as they did so. Abigail couldn't shake the feeling that the thing in the mirror was watching them, silently mocking their efforts. Once the mirror was completely covered, Eleonora seemed to relax slightly. It can't reach us if it can't see us, she said. That's what your father always believed. But it's seen me now, Abigail pointed out. It knows I exist. It's always known that, Eleonora said grimly. But knowledge isn't the same as connection. As long as you don't give it what it wants, your blood, your invitation, it remains trapped on the other side. They retreated from the parlor, locking the door behind them. As they climbed the stairs to return to their bedrooms, Abigail asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Mother, what would have happened if I had given it my blood? If I had let it through? Eleonora stopped on the landing, turning to face her daughter. In the dim light of the lamp she carried, her face looked skull-like, all shadows and sharp angles. The thing in the mirror would have taken your place, she said quietly. To me, to everyone, it would appear to be you. It would speak with your voice, wear your clothes, live your life. But it would not be you. The real Abigail would be gone. Consumed. Trapped on the other side, or simply, erased. These things hunger for life, for substance. They aren't content to merely exist as reflections. And no one would know the difference. Those closest to you might sense something amiss, Eleonora said. A coldness, perhaps. A subtle wrongness. But they would likely dismiss it as their imagination. After all, who wants to believe that their loved one has been replaced by a monster from beyond the mirror? That night, Abigail slept fitfully, plagued by dreams of silver glass and reaching hands with too many fingers. She woke several times, certain she had heard her name being called from somewhere distant, from the east parlor perhaps, where the covered mirror waited. When morning finally came, bringing with it the watery light of a rainy Kentucky day, Abigail rose, feeling exhausted but resolved. The mirror would be removed today. The nightmare would end. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, expecting to find her mother already arranging for the mirror's removal. Instead, she found the house eerily quiet. No sounds came from the kitchen where Mrs. Winters should have been preparing breakfast. No maids moved through the halls with dusters and brooms. Mother? Abigail called, her voice echoing in the empty foyer. Mrs. Winters? No response. A sense of dread building within her, Abigail made her way toward the east parlor. The door remained locked, just as they had left it the night before. She pressed her ear against the wood, but heard nothing from within. Turning away from the parlor, Abigail headed toward her mother's bedroom. Perhaps Eleonora was still asleep, exhausted from the events of the previous night. But as she approached the door, she noticed it standing slightly ajar, unusual, as her mother valued her privacy. "Mother," she called softly, pushing the door wider. "Are you awake?" The bedroom was empty, the bed neatly made. It did not appear that Eleonora had slept there at all. Increasingly concerned, Abigail searched the house from top to bottom. No sign of her mother. No sign of Mrs. Winters or any of the house staff. It was as if everyone had simply vanished overnight, leaving Abigail entirely alone. By mid-morning, her concern had bloomed into full-blown panic. She tried to tell herself there must be a rational explanation. Perhaps her mother had risen early and gone into town to arrange for the mirror's removal. Perhaps she had given the staff the day off, though this seemed unlikely. Abigail found herself drawn back to the east parlor, to the locked door behind which sat the shrouded mirror. As she stood before it, she became aware of a sound, faint, almost at the edge of hearing. A tapping. Rhythmic and persistent. Coming from within the room. Tap. 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 Like a finger against glass. Abigail backed away from the door, her heart racing. She would not open it. She would not look at that mirror again. Whatever was happening, whatever had become of her mother and the staff, the thing in the mirror was surely involved. She retreated to the kitchen, thinking to make herself some tea to calm her nerves, when she heard the distant sound of horse hooves and carriage wheels on the gravel drive. Relief washed over her. Someone was arriving. Her father, perhaps, home a day early. Or maybe her mother returning from town. Abigail rushed to the front of the house, throwing open the heavy oak door just as a carriage pulled to a stop before the steps. The driver, a man she didn't recognize, hopped down and opened the carriage door. And from within emerged Thomas Blackwood, looking pale and thin, but very much alive. "Father!" Abigail cried, running down the steps to meet him. "Thank God you're home." Thomas Blackwood looked startled at his daughter's unusual display of emotion. Normally reserved to the point of coldness, he awkwardly returned her embrace. "Abigail, what's wrong? Where is everyone?" he asked, glancing past her at the seemingly deserted house. "I don't know," she admitted, fighting back tears. "I woke this morning and everyone was gone. Mother, Mrs. Winters, all the staff. And father, there's something else. Something terrible." Thomas's face hardened. "Tell me." "Mother brought a mirror into the house," Abigail said in a rush. "A large one in a gold frame, from Grandmother Pierce's estate. She put it in the east parlor yesterday." All color drained from Thomas's already pale face. "Did you look into it?" he demanded, gripping Abigail's shoulders much as Eleonora had done the night before. "Did you see it?" "Yes," Abigail whispered. "And it spoke to me, Father. My reflection, it moved on its own. It had 6 fingers on its right hand. It wanted me to let it through." Thomas released her and turned to the carriage driver. "You may go," he said tersely, pressing some bills into the man's hand. "I won't be needing you further." The driver tipped his hat, looking relieved to be dismissed. Something about the Blackwood estate had always made the locals uneasy. Thomas hurried up the steps and into the house, Abigail following close behind. "The east parlor, you said?" he asked over his shoulder, already striding in that direction. "Yes, but Father, the door is locked, and there's a sound coming from inside, like tapping on glass." Thomas stopped abruptly, turning to face his daughter. For the first time, Abigail noticed how ill he looked, the hollows beneath his cheekbones, the yellowish tinge to his skin, the way his clothes hung loosely on his frame. Her mother had been right. Thomas Blackwood was dying. "Listen to me carefully, Abigail," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Whatever that thing said to you, whatever promises it made, you must not believe it. It is not your friend. It is not a part of you. It is something old and hungry that wants what it cannot have. Life. Your life." "Mother explained about the fetchlights," Abigail said. She said you've been protecting us all these years." Thomas nodded grimly. And I would have continued to do so, had your mother not. He trailed off, shaking his head. No matter. Now, we must deal with what's before us. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather pouch. From it, he produced a handful of what looked like dried herbs and a small vial of dark liquid. Mountain remedies, he explained, seeing Abigail's questioning look. My grandmother's recipes for protection against unnatural things. Do you think the mirror thing has taken Mother? Abigail asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in her mind all morning. And the others? I don't know, Thomas admitted. But we'll find out. He approached the locked door of the east parlor, sprinkling the dried herbs along the threshold. Then, uncorking the vial, he used his finger to draw a symbol on the door itself, a spiral with strange, angular marks at each quarter. The tapping from within grew louder. More insistent. Thomas drew a deep breath, then produced a key from his pocket. Stand back, he instructed Abigail. Whatever happens, do not look directly into the mirror. Not for an instant. Abigail nodded, positioning herself several paces behind her father, her heart hammering against her ribs. Thomas inserted the key and turned it slowly. The lock clicked. The tapping stopped abruptly. Silence fell, heavy and expectant. Thomas pushed the door open and stepped inside, Abigail following cautiously. The east parlor was exactly as they had left it the night before. The mirror still stood draped with heavy blankets in the center of the room. But something felt different. The air seemed thicker somehow, charged with an energy that made the hair on Abigail's arms stand on end. Mother, she called softly. Are you in here? Thomas held up a hand, signaling for silence. He moved slowly around the covered mirror, examining it from all angles without touching the blankets. It still contained, he murmured, more to himself than to Abigail. The barrier holds. But where is everyone? Abigail pressed. Where's Mother? Not here, Thomas said, gesturing around the empty room. But perhaps. He trailed off, his gaze fixed on the covered mirror. You think they're in there? On the other side? It's possible, Thomas admitted reluctantly. If your mother looked into the mirror, if she made contact with what dwells there. We have to help her. Abigail moved toward the mirror, but Thomas caught her arm. No. That's exactly what it wants. To lure you in with the promise of saving your mother. But if she's trapped in there, then we must find another way to free her, Thomas said firmly. One that doesn't risk you as well. A new sound came from beneath the blankets then, not tapping, but a voice. Muffled, distorted, but unmistakably familiar. Thomas. Thomas, is that you? Eleonora's voice, coming from within the mirror. Thomas stiffened, his grip on Abigail's arm tightening. Do not respond, he whispered. It's a trick. Thomas, please, the voice continued, growing clearer. Help me. It's trapped me in here. I can see you both, but I can't get out. Mother. Abigail cried, unable to help herself. Abigail, Thomas hissed, pulling her further from the covered mirror. That is not your mother. How can you be sure? She demanded. What if it really is her? What if she needs our help? Because I know what these things are capable of, Thomas said grimly. My grandmother saw her own sister taken by one. It used her voice, her memories to trick the family. And when they finally removed the blanket from the mirror. What happened? Abigail whispered. The thing that looked back at them was not human. Not anymore. The voice from the mirror changed then, growing harsh, mocking. Tell her the whole story, Thomas, it said, no longer sounding like Eleonora at all. Tell her what really happened the night she was born. Thomas's face hardened. Be silent, creature. You have no power here. A laugh emanated from beneath the blankets, cold and cutting. No power? Then where is your wife, Thomas? Where are your servants? Where is everyone who looked into the mirror before you arrived? Abigail felt sick. It has them all. Everyone in the house. Not their bodies, Thomas said. Just their reflections. Their images. Without an invitation, without blood freely given, it can't take more than that. Are you certain? The voice taunted. Absolutely certain. Perhaps you should check beneath the blankets just to be sure. See what's become of your precious Eleonora. Thomas turned to Abigail. We need to destroy it. Now. Before it grows stronger. How? Abigail asked. How do you destroy a mirror? Not the mirror itself, Thomas explained. The entity within it. My grandmother had a ritual. A way to bind such creatures to their realm permanently. I've never performed it myself, but I know the words. The steps. Will it free Mother and the others? Thomas hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. But it's our best hope. He turned back to his leather pouch, withdrawing more herbs and a small, ancient-looking knife with strange symbols carved into its bone handle. The ritual requires blood, he said gravely. My blood, freely given. But not to the mirror. To the earth. To the air. To seal the barrier between worlds. Let me do it, Abigail said suddenly. The thing in the mirror is connected to me somehow. It always has been. It makes sense that I should be the one to end this. No, Thomas said sharply. It's too dangerous. You're too connected to it. Your blood might strengthen it rather than bind it. Please, Father, Abigail pleaded. Mother brought the mirror here because of you. Because she knows you're ill. That you're. She couldn't bring herself to say the word dying. Let me help. Let me do this for our family. Thomas studied his daughter's face for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Very well. But you must follow my instructions exactly. One mistake, and the consequences could be dire. I understand, Abigail said solemnly. Thomas directed Abigail to stand before the covered mirror, but not too close. He positioned himself to her right, the knife and herbs ready in his hands. The words are old, he explained. From the hills. Passed down through generations. You won't understand them, but their meaning matters less than the intent behind them. You must focus on sealing the breach. On sending the entity back to its own realm. Permanently. Abigail nodded, her mouth dry with fear, but her resolve unwavering. Whatever happens, Thomas continued, whatever you hear or feel, do not stop the ritual once it begins. And above all, do not look directly into the mirror. Even for an instant. What about Mother and the others? If they can be freed, this ritual will free them, Thomas said, though Abigail detected a note of uncertainty in his voice. Now, are you ready? Abigail took a deep breath. I'm ready. Thomas began to recite words in a language Abigail had never heard before. Harsh, guttural sounds interspersed with sibilant whispers. As he spoke, he sprinkled the herbs in a circle around Abigail's feet. The voice from the mirror grew louder, more desperate. Stop, it cried, once again in Eleonora's voice. Thomas, please, you're hurting me. Abigail, make him stop. Abigail flinched, but held her ground, focusing on her father's words, on the ritual taking place around her. Thomas handed her the bone-handled knife. 3 drops, he instructed between incantations. On the floor before you. Not on the mirror. Never on the mirror. Abigail took the knife with trembling hands. The blade gleamed in the dim light of the parlor, looking impossibly sharp. Carefully, she pricked the tip of her left index finger. A bead of bright red blood welled up. Now, Thomas urged. 3 drops. Count them. Abigail held her bleeding finger over the floor. 1, she whispered, as the first drop fell. 2. Another drop, landing beside the first. 3. The final drop joined the others, forming a small triangle on the wooden floor. Thomas resumed his incantation, his voice growing stronger, more commanding. The room seemed to darken around them, though no cloud had passed before the sun outside. The voice from the mirror changed, no longer Eleanora's, but something older, angrier. "Fools," it hissed. "You cannot bind me. I am as old as your kind, as old as the first reflection in still water. I have waited 19 years for this moment." The blankets covering the mirror began to tremble, as if caught in a strong wind, though the air in the room remained still. Thomas's chanting grew more urgent. "It's working," Abigail whispered, hope rising within her. And then, disaster. A fit of coughing seized Thomas, interrupting the ritual. He doubled over, handkerchief pressed to his mouth, his thin shoulders shaking with the violence of the spasm. When he pulled the cloth away, it was stained with bright arterial blood. "Father!" Abigail cried, moving to help him. "No!" Thomas gasped. "Stay in the circle. Finish the ritual." But it was too late. The moment of distraction had cost them dearly. The blankets covering the mirror flew off as if torn away by invisible hands, revealing the glittering surface beneath. And in that mirror was not Abigail's reflection, nor Thomas's, but a tableau of horror. Eleanora Blackwood stood within the glass, her face contorted in a silent scream, hands pressed against the surface as if trying to break through. Behind her, similarly trapped, were Mrs. Winters and the other household staff, their expressions frozen in terror. "Mother!" Abigail gasped, instinctively stepping toward the mirror. "No, Abigail!" Thomas cried, lunging to stop her. "Don't look at it." But it was too late. Abigail's eyes met those of her reflection, which now stood separate from the image of her trapped mother. The reflection smiled, a cold, triumphant smile that never touched its silver blue eyes. "Thank you, sister," it said, "for the invitation." Abigail realized her mistake too late. In moving toward the mirror, in looking directly at it while her blood still lay fresh upon the floor, she had given the entity exactly what it needed, an invitation, freely offered. The surface of the mirror rippled like disturbed water, and then, impossibly, a hand emerged from the glass, a perfect copy of Abigail's own, except for the sixth finger extending from the side. The hand reached out, grasping at the air, followed by an arm, a shoulder, and then another. Abigail stepped from the mirror and into the east parlor of the Blackwood estate. Thomas fell back, horror etched on his gaunt features. "No," he whispered. "God in heaven, no." The false Abigail, the fetchlight, the hollow walker, whatever it truly was, stood before them, solid and real, examining its hands, its body with evident delight. 19 years, it said in Abigail's voice. 19 years I've waited for this moment. To be whole. To be real. It turned its unnatural gaze on the true Abigail. "And now, sister, it's time for you to take my place." "Never," Abigail said, backing away. "You can't force me." "Can't I?" The entity smiled. "Look again at the mirror." Against her better judgment, Abigail glanced at the mirror. The image of her mother and the staff remained. But now there was something else. A darkness gathering at the edges of the glass, creeping inward like spilled ink. "The void," the entity explained casually. "The empty place where things that are no longer needed go to be unmade." It stepped closer to Abigail. "That's your destination, sister. Unless..." "Unless what?" Abigail whispered, though she feared she knew the answer. "Unless you take my place willingly. Cross over into the mirror realm. It's not so bad there, truly. A world of silver and shadow. You might even find it beautiful in time." Thomas struggled to his feet, the ritual knife clutched in his hand. "Leave my daughter alone, creature." The entity turned to him, its expression almost pitying. "Poor Thomas. Still fighting, even at the end. Don't you see? It's over. You lost 19 years ago when you failed to complete the binding ritual. Then all these years without mirrors, they just delayed the inevitable. Father, what is it talking about? Abigail asked, confused. What binding ritual 19 years ago? Thomas's face was a mask of guilt and grief. The night you were born, he admitted. When the mirrors shattered, I tried to bind it then. The entity that appeared in your reflection. But the ritual went wrong. Instead of binding it completely, I only managed to trap it on the other side of the glass. And now I'm free, the entity said with a terrible smile. Free to claim what should have been mine from the beginning. It lunged suddenly, inhumanly fast, grabbing Abigail's wrist with its six-fingered hand. The touch was cold as ice, sending pain shooting up Abigail's arm. She screamed, trying to pull away, but the grip was like iron. Let her go. Thomas shouted, rushing forward with the knife raised. The entity flicked its free hand almost casually, and Thomas was thrown across the room, crashing into a bookshelf with bone-breaking force. He slumped to the floor, unconscious or worse. Father! Abigail cried, still struggling against the entity's grip. He can't help you now, the entity said, dragging her toward the mirror. No one can. It's time to go where you belong. Abigail fought with all her strength, but the entity was far stronger than its slender frame suggested. Step by step, it pulled her closer to the mirror's gleaming surface. Please, Abigail begged. Don't do this. Let my mother go. Let them all go. They're beyond my reach now, the entity said. The moment I crossed over, they became part of the mirror realm. They'll fade eventually, become one with the void. As will you, if you keep resisting. They stood before the mirror now, Abigail's reflection nowhere to be seen. Instead, the glass showed only the encroaching darkness, with the trapped figures of Eleonora and the others slowly being engulfed by it. One last chance, sister, the entity said. Go willingly, and I'll ensure you survive, after a fashion. Keep fighting, and the void takes you completely. Abigail stared into the mirror at her mother's terrified face, at the darkness consuming everything. And in that moment of despair, she remembered something. The ritual. Her father's words. 3 drops of blood, freely given. Not on the mirror. Never on the mirror. The ritual had been interrupted. But perhaps it could still work. Wait, she said, forcing herself to sound defeated. If I go willingly, you promise I'll survive? That I won't fade into that darkness? The entity's grip loosened slightly, its silver blue eyes gleaming with triumph. I promise. You'll have your own little corner of the mirror realm. Forever. Then I need to say goodbye, Abigail said, gesturing toward her father's crumpled form. Please. Just let me say goodbye to him. The entity hesitated, then nodded. Be quick about it. The transition grows more difficult the longer I remain on this side. It released her arm, and Abigail rushed to her father's side. Thomas was alive, but barely conscious, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Father, she whispered, taking his hand. Her fingers brushed against the ritual knife, still clutched in his grasp. I know what to do now. Thomas's eyes flickered open. Abigail, he murmured. Run. Get away from here. I can't, she said. But I can finish what you started. Before the entity could react, Abigail grabbed the knife and slashed her palm. Blood welled up, bright and red. What are you doing? The entity demanded, starting forward. Binding you, Abigail said, rising to her feet. Properly this time. She lunged at the entity, her bleeding hand outstretched. The entity tried to dodge, but Abigail had the advantage of surprise. Her bloody palm pressed against the entity's chest, directly over its heart. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The entity shrieked, A sound like breaking glass multiplied 1,000-fold. Where Abigail's blood touched it, the entity's form seemed to ripple and distort, as if it were still made of mirror glass despite its apparent solidity. "What have you done?" it screamed, clawing at the bloody handprint on its chest. "What have you done?" "Blood freely given," Abigail said, remembering her father's words. "Not to the mirror, but to bind you." The entity's form was changing now, losing cohesion. Parts of it seemed to turn transparent, revealing a silvery, liquid interior. It staggered backward toward the mirror, reaching out as if seeking sanctuary in the glass. "No," it wailed. "I was so close. So close to being real." It fell against the mirror, but instead of stopping at the surface, it began to sink back into the glass, as if the solid barrier had turned to quicksand. The entity thrashed and fought, but the pull was inexorable. "This isn't over," it cried as it sank deeper. "I'll find another way. Another mirror. Another." Its voice cut off as its head disappeared into the glass. For a moment, its six-fingered hand remained, grasping at the air, and then that, too, was gone. The surface of the mirror rippled once more, then went still. Abigail stared at the glass, barely daring to breathe. The darkness that had been spreading was receding now, pulling back to the edges and then disappearing entirely. And in the center of the mirror, Eleanora Blackwood stood, her expression changing from terror to confusion to hope. "Mother," Abigail whispered, approaching the mirror cautiously. Eleanora pressed her hands against the glass, her lips forming Abigail's name, though no sound came through. Behind her, the staff also seemed to be regaining awareness, looking around in confusion. "How do I get you out?" Abigail asked, fighting the urge to touch the mirror's surface. "How do I bring you back?" A groan from behind her reminded Abigail of her father's presence. She rushed back to Thomas, helping him to sit up. "Father, it's gone. It's gone back into the mirror. But Mother and the others are still trapped. How do we free them?" Thomas looked at the mirror, his expression grim. "I don't know if we can," he admitted. "No one has ever successfully retrieved someone taken by a fetch light." "There must be a way," Abigail insisted. "I won't leave them there." Thomas struggled to his feet with Abigail's assistance. "The ritual," he said. "If we complete it, it might not just bind the entity, but break its hold on its captives." "But you said the ritual went wrong before. What if it goes wrong again?" "It went wrong because I hesitated," Thomas said. "Because when I saw what was in that mirror 19 years ago, what looked back at me from my newborn daughter's reflection, I was afraid. I wanted to protect you, but my fear made the binding incomplete." He squeezed Abigail's hand. "This time, we finish it together." They stood before the mirror once more, Thomas leaning heavily on Abigail for support. In the glass, Eleanora watched them, hope and fear mingling in her expression. Thomas began the incantation again, his voice weaker, but his resolve stronger. Abigail joined him, repeating the strange words as best she could. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with an energy that made Abigail's skin tingle. "The blood," Thomas gasped between words. "Your blood on the floor." 3 more drops to complete the circle. Abigail's wounded hand was still bleeding freely. She let 3 drops fall to the floor, forming a second triangle next to the first. As the 3rd drop touched the wood, the mirror began to vibrate, its surface rippling like water. Thomas's incantation reached a crescendo, the final words falling from his lips with the weight of command. The mirror's vibration intensified, the glass humming at a pitch that made Abigail's teeth ache. And then, with a sound like a distant bell being struck, the surface of the mirror shattered, not into sharp, dangerous shards, but into silvery droplets that hung in the air for a breathless moment before dissolving like mist. Behind where the glass had been, stepping through as if through a doorway, came Eleanora Blackwood, followed by Mrs. Winters and the rest of the staff, all looking dazed but unharmed. "Eleanora," Thomas breathed, reaching for his wife. "Thomas," she responded, rushing into his arms. "You came back. You saved us. Not me, Thomas said, looking at Abigail with pride. Our daughter. She finished what I couldn't 19 years ago. Eleonora embraced Abigail, holding her tightly. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should never have brought that mirror into the house. I thought I knew better than your father. I was wrong. It's over now, Abigail said, returning her mother's embrace. The entity is bound. It can't hurt us anymore. But even as she spoke the words, Abigail glanced at the mirror frame, now empty of glass. Where the mirror had been was now just a rectangular void, a window into nothing. Yet for an instant, just before Eleonora had stepped through, Abigail thought she had glimpsed something in that void, a pair of silver blue eyes, watching, waiting. And she wondered if anything that had lived in darkness for 19 years could ever truly be gone. The Blackwood house knew peace after that day. Thomas Blackwood lived longer than the doctors had predicted, though his illness eventually claimed him in the winter of 1895. Eleonora maintained his protections after his death, following his carefully written instructions. And Abigail, finally free of the shadow that had haunted her since birth, ventured out into the world beyond Willow Creek. But for the rest of her life, Abigail Blackwood never looked into a mirror without remembering those silver blue eyes, so like her own, and the voice that had promised this wasn't over. And sometimes, in dreams, she heard tapping, like a finger against glass, calling her back to the darkness on the other side.